Hello and good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Together in Faith, World Religions and Denominations. My name is Lane Nelson. I am the pastor at Eastside Lutheran Church in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I am with you again on yet another beautiful summer evening. We have had a long string of beautiful summer evenings, and tonight is no exception. It is always so exciting for me to have you folks with me as we think about our faith, as we think about who God is calling us to be. And as a part of the process in this series in particular, we are doing that alongside the study of other religions and denominations to see how God is working in them and what impact does that have on us, what can we learn from one another. And also, how does it cause me or you to dig deep into what is going on in our own lives of faith? And specifically for me and for many of you, why are we Lutheran? To do that, we gather people here, and look at that. We already have several folks tuning in tonight. A big shout out to Connie. How are you? Welcome back. Hope Tim is sitting there with you. Also, Colleen. So good to have you here, Colleen. I wish I could be with you in person. Maybe that can happen soon. Nyla, good evening to you. Irene, just saw you again today. Nice to have you here. Danielle, oh, hey, very cool to see Danielle with the little hand and everything. Please say hi to little Esley for me as well. Judy, good to see you. Saw you a little earlier today also. And Karen, wonderful that everybody can be here as we form this community of faith online, even during these strange days of pandemic. Well, as you are aware, last week we were working with Roman Catholicism, and we kind of looked at Roman Catholicism from the top down, kind of a big picture perspective on what are some of the history of the Roman Catholic Church, but then also what are some of the concepts that we as Lutherans might not be familiar with. But largely it was kind of looking back historically at the Roman Catholic Church. Tonight, as a part of this series, we are looking at Roman Catholicism Part 2. And so Part 2 is, what is Roman Catholicism like today? Because it certainly is different than it was 500 years ago. And for myself even, I find, and I think for many Lutherans, our thoughts of what the Roman Catholic Church is this Protestant Reformation concept, which existed a long time ago. But that is certainly not where Roman Catholicism is at today. Now, Roman Catholicism is all around us, and so it's certainly worth taking at least a couple of weeks and looking at this. As we talked about last week, it is the largest Christian denomination in the United States, roughly give or take 50 million Roman Catholics. But if you ask people what faith they identify with, almost 22% of the U.S. population identifies with being Roman Catholic. So that's just over 1 in 4 people, or just under 1 in 4 people. So there certainly are a lot of Roman Catholics, and so it makes sense for us then to learn more about them. Now, tonight we are going to do this largely through an interview that I have recorded earlier because I myself, not being Roman Catholic, don't have the greatest of insights into that. So I thought, well, who better to ask than a Roman Catholic priest? So as a part of our joint work with others here in the city of Sioux Falls, I have gotten to know Father James Morgan of the Cathedral of St. Joseph's Cathedral. He is the rector of that building, or of that congregation. And so he and I sat down, and I had a chance, one, to get to know him a little bit better, but two, for him to then talk about his understanding of Roman Catholicism, its place in our culture, its place in the world, even a little bit of the impact of what these days of pandemic has been. But at the core of that, and I think this is what you will find, is his perspective on how the church has had to change to address people where they are at in today's world. While the core of what we believe as Christians remains the same. We have to nuance how we convey that to people so that they can understand it in their own circumstances. So we will get to that in just a little bit. But before we do, if you have been around the city of Sioux Falls much, that is one of the big buildings that you see. It is kind of built on the hill right above Minnesota Avenue, and you can pick it out from many of the high points around town. So I thought I would show you just a couple of photographs of St. Joseph's Cathedral. Here it is from outside on the street, and then here is a little bit more of a straight-on look at the building. As you can see, it is a very large structure. He will tell us that it was built in the year, I believe, 1919, but we'll confirm that in the interview. And so it has been around for 100+ years here in our city. But if you take a look around the outside of it, you can see they also don't just have the building, but there's some neat grounds where you can meditate and pray. And there's kind of a focus on family. Of course, being a Roman Catholic church, you find more icons of Mary there than you would in many of our other Christian or Protestant denominations. And so there's this little cove tucked in here with a statue, and then the Behold Your Mother scripture reference next to it. Kind of a neat little area for some prayer and meditation. And then the building goes on from the street, and you can just see the architectural style is just so unique. You can walk around that building for a long time just noticing bits and pieces of the architecture. And then you go inside. Beautiful, big, open room with these high arched ceilings. Lots of things to look at. And the stained glass in there is just incredible there at St. Joseph's Cathedral in Sioux Falls. Just wonderful. You get towards the front, and then you can see the altar and then the large crucifix that is behind it, the big crown that then comes up over the top of the altar. And then something that myself as a preacher find interesting, and that is the pulpit. And that is very, very much a grand pulpit, to be sure. And then, I don't know, it's hard to see, but there's like a little angel up in the top of that, kind of reminding the preacher of who he is called to be and of God's presence with him there. And then there is a giant chair, which is for the bishop, and this would be where the bishop would sit as they preside over worship at the cathedral. Here's a little better version of the altar. You can see back behind the cross, kind of underneath the crucifix, is the tabernacle. We talked a little bit about that last week, and that would be where the bread and wine are stored after communion has been celebrated. Of course, Roman Catholics believing in transubstantiation would believe that to be the actual body and blood of Christ, and then that comes out again to serve other people communion. And then there are several statues all around there. Now, the cathedral has just gone through a big renovation in Sioux Falls, and so if you have not been in there, it is worth your time to go look around or even to go and have a tour. We took our 8th graders on a tour through there last winter. There's just so much to see, and of course the images and the architecture speaks to the theology, and you can see that right here with Jesus in Mary's arms. And then outside, of course, it is St. Joseph's Cathedral, and so there is that statue of St. Joseph out in front. And then it's kind of hard to see, but that statue is located right down kind of front and center as you come up the steps going into that building. But that's a lot about the architecture, but I just wanted to share those pictures because it's such a neat building and one that is certainly prominent in the city of Sioux Falls. But we're here to talk about more than just the architecture. We're talking about what is Roman Catholicism today. Last week, again, we talked about it historically and from a broader perspective. Today, via interview with the rector, Father James Morgan, we talk about its impact on our world today. But before I hit start on that interview, quick shout out to Dorothy. Nice to have you here. And look at little Renee. My relative from North Dakota is joining us again tonight. Nice to have you here. Renee, you normally tell me you watch it an hour later, so what a privilege to be live with you tonight. But with all of that being said, I'm going to start the interview because it got longer than I was anticipating it to be. So stick with me. We will kind of have a wrap up at the end of this interview. But in the meantime, I hope that you find this insightful about the Roman Catholic Church wherever it is that you live and whatever it is that you might be having from your own personal experience with the Roman Catholic Church. Some of those are positive, some of those are not so positive. As a Lutheran pastor, a lot of the new members we get are people who used to be Roman Catholic, but for whatever reason were disenfranchised and felt that Roman Catholicism or that Lutheranism was similar enough to Roman Catholicism, but maybe not with some of the baggage. So, again, with that being said, I hope you enjoy this interview with the rector of St. Joseph's Cathedral, Father James Morgan. Now, one last disclaimer. When I recorded this interview, there was a slide that was on the recording that had our Together in Faith piece, but I didn't realize it was there, and so it will say Kristen Sawyer on there. Well, this is obviously not Kristen Sawyer, so please try not to let that distract you. That was user error on my part, and I apologize that I have that wrong slide up for the entire interview. Here we go. Hi, this is Pastor Lane again with you as we continue our study series on Together in Faith, Religions and Denominations. And I am very blessed today to be sitting here with Father James Morgan, who serves as the rector at St. Joseph Cathedral.
Thank you, Pastor Lane. It's great to be here. It's great to talk with all of you too. So thank you for asking.
I want to first give a big thank you not only for today, but for those of you who don't know, Father Morgan worked with our confirmation students this last winter as we were looking at other denominations and religions, and so a big thank you for the partnership you've had with
You're welcome. Yeah, what a great bunch of kids they were too. So thank you to the confirmation candidates, and I hope that the Holy Spirit is guiding you, directing you now in your post confirmation time.
Wonderful. Amen. Yeah.
Amen. Exactly.
Well, first, why don't you say just a little bit about yourself and who
Sure.
you are, and maybe how you even came to become a priest.
Sure. Father James Morgan, as he said, I'm actually became a priest later in life.
Okay.
I worked for 12 years. Actually, worked longer than that, about 15 years, but 12 years in public relations in Aberdeen for a Catholic college, Presentation College.
Okay.
Single guy, you have to be celibate, meaning unmarried, to become a priest. That's one of our requirements for our ordinations, for priestly ordinations. So I was unmarried. My father had died young. I was 28. He was 57 when he died, but I had two younger in the family, a 7th and an 8th grader.
Okay.
So it's hard to keep a girlfriend when they say, what we're going to do tonight, and I go, I'm not sure about you, but I'm going to see my little brother, my little sister, to see what's going on. So, but I think that's one of the reasons why when I was 35, I was still single.
Yeah.
And, I began praying about this, or at least praying what God wanted for my life. And
Right.
we do something in the Catholic Church called Eucharistic Adoration.
Okay.
And that is the host that we consecrate that becomes what we call the body of Christ. We keep in a place, we bring it out in a vessel we call a monstrance. So, and then you can sit in front of it and pray.
Huh.
We call it praying in front of the real presence of Jesus.
Sure.
So I did that for a year and a half, like
Wow.
from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. on a Thursday morning. And that's
Huh.
where God spoke to me and invited me to consider this. So I went to St. Thomas University to discern.
Okay.
I did 2 years of philosophy there, and then I did a spirituality summer at Creighton University. And then from there, because my grades were really good. And of course, you get better grades when you get older, because you actually study.
Yeah, and
But
you care about what you're learning.
Exactly, you care about what you're learning. So I was asked to go to Rome. So I studied at the North American College in Rome for 4 years. That's where I lived in Italy.
Oh, excellent.
4 years.
Yeah.
So I got to meet St. Pope John Paul II
Oh.
while he was there. Met him 4 times. I
Oh,
actually
wow.
served Mass for him. I got to read at St. Peter's Basilica on
Did you?
New Year's Day of 1999. I
Huh.
got up and did the second reading in English, because they do all the readings in different languages,
Okay, okay.
modern languages.
Yep, yep.
The Mass is in Latin, but then all the readings and everything else is done in the vernaculars of different countries. So.
That's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I went to my school, and then I was ordained in 2001
Okay.
with,
I was too.
oh, you really? Oh my gosh, we got that in
Yeah,
common.
Look at that. Huh.
June 22nd.
June 30th.
June 30th,
Yeah.
wow.
Huh.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you've
Small
been a
world.
minister, you've been a pastor as long as I've been a priest.
Yeah.
We just celebrated our 19th years.
Yeah, exactly.
Next year will be our 20th year.
Big anniversary.
Big anniversary. So yeah, so that's what I did. So, but I worked, went to University of South Dakota after high school and got a
Okay.
degree. I actually went there on a theater scholarship.
Huh.
I got a degree in political science. Spent 2 weeks in Washington DC, I think, and said, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. And so
Yeah.
I came back and did a little, some journalism and then public relations, construction, did a
Yep.
couple years of construction to get, just to work hard and make some money.
I would think the political end and the public relations piece would serve
Yeah.
you well as you're dealing with large groups of people.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
they do, it does serve me very well, and the theater does too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you have to get up in front of people and talk.
Yep.
Especially as simultaneously.
Well, a lot of the folks who are participating in this class with me don't have a vast knowledge of the Roman
Sure,
Catholic Church,
yeah.
and a lot of what we do is study Reformation history. But would you speak a little bit about what is the Roman Catholic Church like today in the 20th and 21st century?
Yeah, certainly, thank you, Pastor. You know, it's a little bit different than what, you know, Roman Catholicism was fairly insular for many, many years, especially, let's just say, post, what we call the counter-reformational.
Yep.
So post-reformational.
Yep.
Up until about the 1940s and 50s, and then there began to be a change sort of came about. There was sort of a movement to attempt to open up the Catholic Church to so that other denominations and other religions could see sort of who we are, and
Sure,
what we're about. I sort of liken it almost to Judaism in a certain, the Jewish religion, because that's sort of very sort of exclusive and insular too, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, not many people go to a synagogue, or learn about Judaism. And one of the reasons is because they want to keep, they keep the religion sort of to themselves, so.
Yep.
In 1960, we had this huge council, it was an ecumenical council,
Yeah.
so even bishops Lutheran bishops from around the world, the Orthodox priests, and bishops were all invited to this ecumenical council in Rome with the Pope.
Huh.
And it was about the Catholic Church.
Yep.
So we wanted to get different, survey other religions, other denominations, I should probably say, to
Sure.
find out, you know, their purview of the Catholic Church. And we went through a sort of our own little a reformation of sorts.
Huh. Okay.
It was more of a liturgical reformation. So
Okay.
Mass was in Latin. People didn't necessarily understand what was being prayed, although they could follow along with a missal, Latin, English missal. Mass parts were sung over the top as the priest would say things in silence. He had his back to the people, which wasn't sort of he was sort of trying to be offensive to them, or not engage them, but the whole thing was about this, the consecration, the sacramental presence of Jesus in what we call his body and blood in Holy Communion,
Yep.
in the Blessed Sacrament. So what he was doing in confecting the bread and wine
Sure.
into the body and blood of Christ. So all the emphasis is on that. So the whole idea was to open up the Mass. The first thing is that they allowed the vernacular to be used, so we could say Mass in English.
And what was the impact?
Yeah, it was both, in a certain sense, detrimental,
Huh.
because a lot of people who thought that the Catholic Church should continue to be this church that they all grew up with, and to be more of the sort of exclusive church, that sort of disappeared.
Change is hard.
It changed, yeah. And then it opened up a whole new world to other Catholics. But there was fallout. There was fallout, and then there was also an embracing of this too by many people. They embraced the fact that there was going to be the vernacular. The priest turned around and faced the people, and he said mass at the altar. A lot more dialogue back and forth in the mass between the people and the priest, where that didn't occur before. And so, yeah, it was well accepted by many, and then it was also, in some ways, many felt like they were being excluded because it wasn't their church anymore. So, and these things happen.
Yeah.
Anytime you make a change, you're going to have fallout from it.
Right.
You're also going to have some positive, some good things that come from it too. So that changed us. We sort of opened up our doors and said, look at us, here we are, and this is who we are. So, all of a sudden there were mixed marriages. Before Vatican Council II, Catholics married Catholics. Mixed marriages maybe 1%.
Yeah.
Now mixed marriages in the Catholic Church make up about 40%.
Well, I know even as a kid growing up in central North Dakota as a Scandinavian Lutheran, that's what a mixed marriage was. It was two different denominations, and especially a Lutheran and a Catholic. That took some getting used to.
Exactly. So that was the first, in terms of moving into the 20th century and 21st century, that was that Vatican Council too, that lasted from 1960 to 1965, was huge because it changed how we said mass. It also, pastorally, we had to be more engaged with the people, and even ecumenically, more engaged with other denominations. So that's what it did. And so it moved us forward in terms of dealing with modernity, modernity, the modern world.
Right. Well, what would you see as some of the strengths and challenges for the Roman Catholic Church in the days that we're living in now? Not necessarily COVID, but not exclusive of COVID also. Yeah.
I think some of this, probably the strengths that we have is the sort of the unity, of the church, and so this may be one of the differences that we have with the denominations. Our governance is very centralized.
Yep.
We have.
We do not have those kinds of pictures at Eastside Lutheran.
Yeah. So the Petrine, we believe in the Petrine office. That is when Jesus gave the keys to Peter. He made him the head of the church, the head apostle, so the head of the church, the Christian church. And then the bishops are successors of all of the apostles. So, everything's traced back to Peter as the first pope, and the apostles and all the bishops that have been consecrated since then trace our roots back to those first apostles. It's an apostolic faith, right? It's a faith of history. Okay. And I think that's one of the great strengths that we have, because I think our teaching has never changed, for 2,000 years. It's never changed. There's documents that you can go back to 100 AD, and you can look at it and you can say, oh my God, the Catholic Church still teaches this sort of thing, So even when it comes to, even though we've had a liturgical reform, you can go back and even the Mass that we do today, which, the structure is still the same as the Mass from way back when. But you can go back to a document called the Didache from about 150 AD, and you get parts of the Mass there, the consecration of the bread and the consecration of the wine. So I think it's that one of the great strengths is our unity. It's a universal church. That's what Catholic means, by the way, is universal. So it's a unit. So we have that centralization of governance where we know that there's no vacillating on certain issues. We just know this is the teaching, this is the doctrine, and this is what we follow. So I think that's a great strength that we have. I think one of the strengths that came out of the council, Vatican Council II, is how we engage people now, especially pastorally. And it's a sacramental church, so to be able to go to somebody who's dying and hear their confession, and there's a confession rite in the Lutheran rite. I think in the back of the Lutheran book I've seen a penance service or a penance rite for confession. And I think you have the option to use it, or you don't have to use it, right? So ours is a sacrament, and you're supposed to use it once a year. You're at least supposed to go to confession once a year. But to go and hear somebody's confession and anoint them. And so this sacramental understanding of the church, that it's not just about the sort of listening to the word and praying and the pastoral aspect that you do, but also we go in for a particular reason, and that is to confer a sacrament.
It's relational.
It is very relational.
And so much of ministry is being the presence of Christ for others, and you can't do that if you're not engaged.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I think some of our weaknesses, I think some of our strengths are also our weaknesses too,
Yeah.
you know. Because of that, we can look like there's an exclusivity,
Okay.
you know, still within the church, even though we're much different than what we were, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. But I think that's probably one of our weaknesses. The centralization can also be, from the top down type of
Sure.
governance, can also be,
Uh-huh.
for pastors, again, and even for lay people.
I know in the ELCA, having our central offices, if you will, located in Chicago is hard enough for people. I can't imagine it being across an ocean in a different continent.
Exactly, yeah. Or even in a rural, so we have a diocese like East River, South Dakota. So
Yeah.
our bishop is here in Sioux Falls, but if you're up in Aberdeen or if you're in some other
Mhm.
place, it's hard to make that connection.
Yeah,
So-
we have the same thing in the South Dakota Synod.
Yeah. So those are just a couple of the strengths and
Sure.
weaknesses that I can think of. I think the secularization of just what's happening in our world today makes it difficult to engage
Yes.
people and
Yeah.
actually to engage in any sort of a conversation about, like just viewing this pandemic,
Mhm.
how do you engage someone about dependency upon God and trust in our Lord, and in healing and in the kingdom to come.
Sure.
This life is important, but it's for the next life. When they don't even believe in God, you can't even have that conversation because there's no starting point to have that conversation. So, and you're coming under that attack as well as we're coming under that attack. All of Christianity, Christendom is coming under. The culture has changed drastically in 40 or 50 years, as we know.
It's swung just dramatically, and so many people now, at least in my situation, see the church more as a social institution as opposed to a sacred institution.
Right, exactly.
And they see it trying to meet just the needs of people, which is a part of it, but it's not the main part of it.
Yes. I think one of the traps that we fell into right after the council, when we sort of wanted to become more modern, a modern church, right, was that social justice became a huge issue, and it's still a huge issue, but it led into what was something called liberation theology, which kind of developed in Latin America. And the next thing you know, we've got priests becoming revolutionaries, and there's this whole sort of this doctrine that develops that has a foundation in the gospel, but does not necessarily has any practicum, any practice, before this particular time in the 1960s and 70s. So that kind of moved us into, well, is the gospel just about social justice? Isn't the social justice supposed to a means and not an end? So this is what we can all fall into these traps where the means becomes the end instead of the end being the kingdom, right? So
yeah, they both have significance and importance, and so where do you find that right balance as you meet people holistically in body and spirit?
Right, exactly.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to give me just a minute on this place that we're in, St. Joseph Cathedral. You serve as rector. Real quickly, what is the role of rector, and then what is the 30-second history of the cathedral?
Well, the rector is just a fancy title for the associate pastor for the bishop. Meaning I do all the work. I gotta do all the dirty work, all the leg work and everything. So rector means that you take care of the cathedral. It's under your supervision, and even though the bishop is the pastor of a cathedral. Cathedral comes from the word, as I told your students, cathedra, which means chair in Latin, which think of the chair of Moses in the Old Testament, and Jesus talking about that in the Gospels. So in early Christianity, a chair was used to make authoritative statements. So there's a chair in the cathedral that the bishop sits in, and that's where he sort of makes his pronouncements for our diocese. So that's different than being like a pastor of a parish. Or pastor of a church. So, but I am sort of the pastor because I take care of all the menial details, right?
You bet.
And the bishop comes in and does all the he does more of the theoretical and the pronouncements. And, the leadership, the shepherding. He's the shepherd, the chief shepherd of the diocese. So yeah, so it's a beautiful cathedral built in started in 1915, finished in 1919. They took a break during World War I, and then they came back and finished it mainly by the Irish-German families in this neighborhood who worked down in John Morrell's back in the day. The limestone was all shipped in from someplace in Indiana, and we just restored it in 2011 to 2012,
Beautiful.
2013.
Yeah. If any of you watch, you haven't been here in the last year or so, it's definitely worth your time to come in and to enter into that feeling of the sacred.
Please come on in, and we're happy to have you to walk around, take pictures, to look around, and if you got any questions, you can find somebody who's walking around the cathedral, myself as a priest, or you can go to the cathedral offices and just ask about things. We generally have a brochure in the back, and we got rid of everything during the pandemic, but now we're putting stuff out again, so that you can pick that brochure up and kind of do a self-tour.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your
You're
time.
welcome.
This is really appreciated. I know you have things to be getting to, so I just want to thank you for your time and know that we are holding you in prayer as we kind of do ministry here in the center of Sioux Falls together. I know we wrestle with a lot of the same issues as we've talked about. So.
Yes, we wrestle a lot of the same issues.
Thank you,
Pastor
God bless
Lane.
you in your work.
Yeah, God bless you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I hope you found that interview informative, if nothing else, maybe a little entertaining. Again, it got a little bit longer than I initially thought, but once we started that conversation about life and faith and all of those things, somehow you kind of get caught up in the moment. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to that. I would love to hear your feedback on that, thoughts that it maybe sparked in you, maybe questions that it raised. Again, as Lutherans, we kind of have that strange dichotomy with Roman Catholicism. Is for many of us, we are Lutherans because of a break we had at some point in history, or even maybe in our own lives with Roman Catholicism. But on the other hand, it's at the core of our identity from Luther himself, and it's relayed in the way in which we even order our worship. There's just so many similarities. So again, my thanks to Father Morgan for his time in conversation. My apologies to you that it said Kristen Sawyer Johnson throughout that entire interview. But this interview and this topic continues to raise in myself this reminder that in today's world, we as Christians need to strengthen one another, because we are all about a common goal, and that is to proclaim the life and hope of Jesus Christ to a world who desperately needs it. It takes a little bit different form depending on if you are Lutheran or Roman Catholic or Methodist, as we have looked at some of those denominations already. But at the core is a God who loves each and every one of us, who loves us so much that came to be a part of us in the person of Jesus, that we might be reminded that we are not alone, that we then reminded that we have a Savior who loves us no matter what we might have done. Reminds us that God is with us no matter what you might be experiencing, even tonight in your own lives and in your own home. And gives us the assurance that you are loved and valued, and that because of our life in Jesus, we have purpose and we have a hope. May that hope take deep root in your life, and may that be a driving force for you, regardless of what your denomination is. That you can proclaim this person and God in Jesus Christ to others. May you know it, and may you share it. And may we continue to discover what that means for us as we have these weekly conversations with one another. Thanks also to Carol, who jumped in here as that interview was going on. I really enjoy the time I get to spend with each of you and the comments that you make, so thank you for that. I value your time. But one note, we will not be holding this Tuesday night class for the next 2 weeks. I might pop up with some things here and there during that time frame, but I'm going to be out of the office here at Eastside, and so we will not have this regular Tuesday night dialogue for a little bit, but we will resume again once we hit the month of September. So until then, God's peace to each and every one of you. May you know that you are loved by God, valued by your congregation, and that you have new life and hope each and every day in Jesus Christ. Good night, and God bless you.